Okay, so hi. Can you all hear me? Yeah? Okay. So in this short talk, I'm going to share a few practical strategies that we can think about for creating an inclusive classroom. And so upon first glance, the strategies that I'm going to talk about are going to appear simple. They're practices that a lot of us are already doing in our classes, or they're practices that any of us could do in our classes. So just to start, I want to model for you what I think about when I start to develop a class, what I'm going to call here my sort of constants, things that I take into consideration for any course that I teach in the writing program. So you can see, sorry, I'm having a problem with this. You can see here that in Writing 2, we have a very diverse cohort of students. And when I think about some of these identities and the ways that they overlap with one another, what that asks me to do is to think about how I'm setting up my course expectations, how I'm selecting readings and assignments for students, how I talk about what it means to use language in the 21st century, and how I use different formats to present information to my students. And all of these things are what I consider. And the value, I think, of starting here in this place is that these can be applicable for any student, right? In other words, these aren't principles that just, favor one particular subpopulation of students. They actually are something that can help all students in my classes. So I want to talk about 3 in particular. And the first thing I want to talk about is grades. So I've been a writing program faculty member here for 4 years and teaching otherwise for about 15. And one of the key things that I have sort of evolved and changed over time is the way that I talk with students about course grades. And I think I have to do that in a writing class because students think of writing as something that is subjective, and even in our writing program, where we all work together to meet the same course learning outcomes, we all have different expectations for writing. So one of the things that I've started doing, I would say more recently in the past maybe 5 to 6 years, is implementing rubrics. But not just taking rubrics and assigning a grade and giving them back to students, but actually thinking of rubrics as a way to have a dynamic process with students so that they understand the expectations for writing, but that they also have practice using the rubric. Figuring out how to apply the rubric to models of student writing, to their own writing, to their peers' writing, and also to the expert readings that we do in our course. In other words, I also ask students to learn the language of the rubric so that together we figure out how to make it shared language. And it's interesting because when we do this, then they start applying it to things that we read and they learn how to use that language to talk to one another. I also spend a lot of time thinking about how I have different learners in my classroom and what that might mean. And for me, when I present information to students, I try to provide multiple ways for them to have access to our course content. Yes, face-to-face class time allows us to see and sort of imagine what students are learning well, what they might improve, and also we can do that through tests, through homework assignments, and formal writing assignments. But those 2 things alone for me are simply not enough. I can't hear and sort of see what it is that students are having challenges with if I'm not trying out multiple formats in the classroom. So for instance, one of the things I make a lot of use of that I'll talk about next is reflective writing. Other things I spend a lot of time doing are different sorts of discussion activities, and I want to try this game at some point in my Writing 21 class. And I also spend a lot of time with students working on application of our course concepts so that they're practicing it and they can see it in action. And throughout the 10 weeks of one given quarter, this allows students with different learning types to be able to do something that matches with their learning style. It's not something that I have to think about as separate from my course or something I have to apply. It's already built into the structure of the course. And I haven't so far heard complaints that students are doing too many different kinds of things, so I think that's positive. And the last thing that I want to talk about is the integration of reflection into the classroom. So when we ask students to reflect, and this can be in a small way, this can be in a large way, there is a lot of research to suggest that just the act of reflecting can improve student performance. So in a writing classroom in particular, I like to integrate reflection so that students are thinking about their processes for learning, and they're also thinking about their choices, why they made particular choices as they approached an assignment, why they developed a particular process, and to self-evaluate how they might improve that in the future. Through the process process, and I just shared 3 kind of different examples here for you, but through the process of engaging in this kind of reflection, the idea is to help students build self-efficacy so that they can be sure in future, let's say, writing classes or in other classes, that they have processes that are going to help them to be successful. So these are small, just practical things that I do, and I hope that maybe some of you who are already doing this, we can talk during breakout session, or maybe some of you would like to try this, okay? So thank you.